All right. I want to first confirm that my audio is working. Uh, because yeah, we had a total. I don't know what that was, to be honest. But I'm gonna wait first for confirmation that we have that up and running before I start yapping. So yeah. Uh, Let me see. Once someone says yes, I can hear you, I'm start yapping again. Bruh. And I talk so much. I'm not saying such profound things. Could have been giving you guys the secret to everything. Anyway, audio is good now, so let's just get back into it. Some kind of crazy kind of how. TikTok, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to hear this all over again. So here we go. Round two, fight. The hot drink, regular Nescafe, oatmeal creamer. Why? I haven't re-upped on my coffee. Waiting on somebody to bring Mexican kids coffee for me, and also I need to order my Tactus Squatch from Amazon. I'll show you guys the packaging because people keep asking me what is the name, and I'm like, it's Tactus Squatch. You'll understand once you see the packaging. Anyways, my I'm gonna keep this on YouTube and TikTok because I don't want to go through the process of everybody else. So if you were watching on Facebook, hit the YouTube link or just download TikTok. But yeah, hot drink, coffee, hot take, politics and geopolitics, and the fact that they're gonna do you every day. So you should pay attention, you should be concerned, and you should learn how what happens across the world does still have an impact on us right here on Little St. Martin. I'll go in more into details about a particular issue when I get to the Game of the Month segment. But suffice to say, I very often get questions from, whether from parents or teachers or even my own colleagues, members of parliament, other citizens, that can usually be answered with geopolitical reality. And I think sometimes people will say, that's an excuse. But actually, it's not. I think it's a measure of self-awareness as an individual and as a country to kind of realize that there are things that you cannot control, but then you can take steps to mitigate the impact that's being felt, to you directly or to your country directly. And I think in the region, who we see doing that very well is probably Barbados, probably Guyana, taking these measures to make themselves as self-sufficient and as independent as possible, completely. Because as I always say, independence is not just a constitutional status. It comes with a lot of responsibility. And it's something that you have to really work at being able to achieve and sustain. All right, so audio is good, good. The word of the day, if you're just joining this vocabulary building journey, the word of the day has been changed up a bit. We have the word, we have a fun fact about it, and its etymology, meaning where did it come from, brought to you by Merriam-Webster Dictionary. Today's word of the day, as I was getting into when I realized that my audio had kind of failed, was umpteen. So umpteen is an informal adjective meaning very many or indefinitely numerous. So for example, the artist has painted the same subject umpteen times, yet each piece has its own unique quality. The life of a showgirl often includes umpteen costume changes, elaborate props, etc. So it means just a lot. Where it came from, Merriam-Webster said, there may not be a gazillion ways in English to refer to a large indefinite number, but there are definitely more than a soup song. Any of these, such as zillion, bazillion, gazillion, jillion, they start with illion, as in million, and then you add a satisfying consonant or syllable in front for some extra oomph. The adjective umpteen does the same for teen, with the oomph being provided by the ump in umpty. Umpty, which I bet you also didn't know was a word, is an adjective meaning such and such, as in umpty% or umpty for, and it kind of popped up in the latter half of the 1800s. Now, we only occasionally use umpty these days, but you're bound to hear or read umpteen or umpteenth, so the latest in a definitely numerous series any times. And what I was saying previously is that I think it's pretty cool that we have our own word for that, don't we, on St. Martin. So umpteen is one of those words that is kind of exaggerating, right? So you're kind of saying, well, I told you for the umpteenth time, pick up, the milk on time or so. Here on St. Martin, what you'll hear is We said it 50, 1100 times. 5011. I don't know what is that. Nobody knows, but it is something that we say. You'll hear, I tell this child 50, 1100 times, turn off the lights because he run up my light bill. So that's something that we also culturally here have that can kind of match umpteen, because we don't really use umpteen in Simatel. Like, not that I've ever heard it said, but 50, 1100, 100% I've heard that any number of times. So yeah, that brings us back to game of the month. But I wanted to kind of switch it up a bit and relay it back to because we're all about education here, right? So I wanted to kind of relay it back to what I said with the hot take. I said geopolitics and politics as a whole is going to do you, whether you do them or not. Sometimes I'll say something in conversation about a conflict or something that's happening in a country that's not directly related to Simatin. And when I say directly related, I mean it's not a country in the kingdom, it's not the Netherlands, and it's not any other Caribbean country. So boom, guys. Last week, I had a tech scale. From one day to the next, my graphic card in my PC stopped working. Now, I had a beautiful, gigantic AMD Radeon RX 6800 XT that I had got 3 years ago, and then it died. It just died from one night to the next. Like, I was gaming one night, the next day I went to turn it on to continue gaming. Poof, gone. Lucho Man saved the day by offloading a spare graphics card that he had and installing it in my PC. And I was very relieved about that, because if you're into technology at all and been keeping up with the news, you know that we face a challenge with affordability of graphics cards, RAM, etc. There's a pivot that's happening to AI from most tech companies. Game developers are not excluded from this phenomenon. And gaming component manufacturers are also making that pivot. And it's starting to already kind of make things very expensive for us. Now, this plus conflicts in areas where the raw materials for these types of components are mined. We're thinking Congo, we're thinking Sudan, This is not to say, there's also a pivot to AI that's kind of driving this, right? It's not to say that I'm either for or against AI, but the reality is it's always been present. But when you started getting these LLMs, ChatGPT, OpenAI, this focus on generative artificial intelligence, it highlights several pending economic and environmental crises that we are already seeing come to bear, and we can expect more to bloom, actually. So let me explain. So right before the start of 2026, NVIDIA, tech company, announced that it was going to reduce its graphics card production by up to 40% this year as compared to last year. This is in large part due to ongoing memory shortages, like I mentioned. So RAM chips, they announced because of the shortage, but also their own strategic shift towards AI hardware, something that most major companies have begun doing more recently. You'll maybe have noticed when you load Windows, that it'll pop up and tell you that Copilot is now embedded in Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel. You now have to use Copilot to do certain things you could have just done by yourself in these programs. And there's going to be a twofold impact from this, I think. So first, I want to talk about the impact with RAM and how that is a geopolitical reality we have to face, and then the RAM apocalypse. So RAM is random access memory. It's a device's high-speed short-term memory. It temporarily stores data for quick access by the CPU and other components. It's in your computer, it's in your smartphone, it's in your tablet, it's in everything. The amount and speed of the RAM you've got is what affects your device's performance and its ability to multitask. Like right now in my PC, I have 32 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM. So I can do quite a bit all at the same time on my personal computer. The RAM apocalypse refers to this ongoing global memory supply shortage. I'm going to read a bit from a piece from an article by the author's name is Olia on dataimpulse.com. And it's just kind of explain what you can kind of see coming. So she starts off with 2023 was not so far ago, but back then the price of SSDs was on the cheap. The culprit of this change was, of course, the AI data center boom that transformed the market by late 2024. AI systems, also known as large language models, are basically trained on massive data sets. They process so much data that it's easy for them to understand the context and reply as a human. LLMs are typically deployed on GPU clusters, which are an interrelated network of computing nodes, each equipped with 1 or 2 GPUs. Each cluster needs terabytes of memory. and AI projects now operate on thousands of such nodes. They aim to handle complex tasks with turbo speed. However, running them takes plenty of RAM and flash storage. So companies are moving away from training heavy LLM workloads towards inference focused deployments. And because inference itself requires frequent access to large model files, demand for nearline storage has grown. Now, in the US, for example, you see this popping up. Maybe you come across creators that talk about how AI is screwing their town or city's water supply with their reservoirs, because you need the cooling to also make sure that the computers processing this data don't overheat. So anyway, in the US, you have what's called the Stargate project. Now, that project aims to provide the US with continued leadership in the field of artificial intelligence. It's believed that the project will reindustrialize the United States, creating strategic potential to protect the national security of America and its allies. Among primary investors are SoftBank, OpenAI, and Oracle. Companies such as Microsoft, Nvidia, and ARM will also participate, but they will apparently be just technical partners. What is the project about? First of all, several data centers for artificial intelligence are expected to be created in the US. The company's joint venture will begin with a large data center in Texas and eventually expand to other states. The creators promise that this will create hundreds of thousands of jobs, ensure American leadership in the field of AI, and Stargate is expected to take 5 to 6 years to complete. Now, this deal signed between OpenAI, Samsung, and SK Hynix was for 900,000 DRAM wafers per month. That's nearly 40% of the world's entire production of memory. Such a situation will cause a great problem in the future, making traditional PC and server markets struggle to compete. Even mechanical hard drives, which may seem unrelated to AI, are seeing prices climb 10 to 15%. Now, how does this impact us on little old SXM, you may ask? So if we talk about device procurement for schools, for example, whether laptops, desktops, digital boards, and tablets, increased prices on the global market would severely impact our ability to source these items at an affordable rate, especially because we're already paying a markup for the shipping to get them here. What also impacts the price of RAM and other components I mentioned earlier are the conflicts occurring in raw material production zones. So yes, while we're maybe not directly impacted by the mass murders and other atrocities in the conflicts in Sudan, Congo, Palestine, etc., we do feel it in other ways. And it's important to recognize these facts and apply that nuance when asking, well, why can't every kid have a state-of-the-art tablet or laptop at school? Especially as we see prices ticking upwards every other week. For example, um, the next level up from the graphics card that I had that died is already $400 more expensive than the level I had. The one that was replaced when Lucho bought it, because it was lightly used, so maybe it's a year old, is still at the baseline price that he bought it at. And normally, for a year or 2-year-old graphics card, you would expect to see the price go down. But they keep it high because they're either not going to make any more of it because of the pivot, of course, to AI, or because it is that much more expensive to produce it. So when you see these prices taken upward, you have to very carefully plan out and deploy what limited resources we have here to ensure that we get the best possible rate of return. So in other words, we have to start treating Simmat like a business. That's something that I apply to this ministry every day. And when the business is broke, wish lists have to go on the furthest to the back. It's a harsh reality, but it's something that we need to start discussing as a country, as a community. Because if we're not able to look in the mirror and say, we really can't afford this, or if we continue trying to squeeze blood from a literal stone, it's going to get tougher. And we're going to set up future generations, including this one right now, for absolute failure. So this is something that I plan to talk about a bit more often on the stream, which is the reality of how what happening out there is impacting us here from a cost perspective. It's not just bread and cheese that goes up, guys. It's everything. It's cheese, yes. It's bread, it's flour, it's oil. When you see your food prices go up in restaurants, you can expect the same to happen across the board. So as we look at how we digitize our schools, how we move forward with, putting devices in kids' hands, and personally, sometimes taking them out of kids' hands, these things are we have to consider. And these are things that I consider every day. So operating at least Mekis like a business, but in truth, start operating like a business. If businesses don't have money, things gotta go. So that's what I want to talk about a bit from the game of the month to kind of relay it back. I'll take. And like I said, I'm going to do this a bit more often because, again, it's all about education for everyone. Jumping into some of our main topics while I try to rush off the updates. because I do have calm today. And what was I gonna say? Yes. Coming up, we're going to have the theme announcement soon for the second annual Dame Ruby Butte National Short Story Contest. I confirm RBC as a returning partner. They were the only partner that could not confirm for 3 years in advance. And of course, we have Bull Chance, Antec, and Class Electronics returning as partner sponsors again for the prizes. This contest, of course, is open to kids between 12 and 14 years of age. If you're turning 12 in the month of September, you can still participate. Fun fact, last year's winner turned 12 in September of last year. Some changes are going to be coming to the rules, in particular publication of the winning stories. There was a bit of a misunderstanding between winners and how we were going to handle that, but we are going to publish the week following the announcement of the winners. So winners are announced on September 8th, with Literacy Day, and we're going to start once we announce the theme. Basically, you can start working on your stories. And I think I might do a school tour to generate some interest. We had sent letters to the school boards last time, for them to communicate this to the students, but not all students heard about it, as I learned from Teen Times after the fact. So I might, just pop up just to talk to those grade levels about what, we're looking for and what they can expect. And of course, the prizes, because that's really what it boils down to. So keep an eye out for that. Into the trust fund, I believe with ERP1, we have some movement on the letters of intent. So I should be getting a more comprehensive update about that by the end of this week. And then next week, I can let you know what exactly our timelines are looking like. I did provide answers, of course, to MP Duran, who sent me questions about the trust fund projects, FRLP and ERP1. So those have been sent out, and I'll probably do post about those as well, just so that the public knows that those questions were answered. Because I think sometimes, you get questions, MPs will send questions, but then the public never hears about whether or not the answer was delivered. But the answer was delivered. So yeah, I'll put that out later. And then as well, some questions that he had about public education in general. Moving into education, this provision of education legislation, which contains the hair discrimination amendment in it, that advice is being finalized, and then hopefully we'll be on target for Q2 of 2026 in Parliament. Last time I was here, I shared that the ministry was going to host its strategic planning session. Now that was really great. It happened on February 13th. Yeah. And what can I say? Yeah, no, it was a good session. I want to thank everybody again publicly for participating. It was interactive. It was an interactive and enjoyable day spent together. And I definitely appreciated everyone's candor and their willingness to sort of self-reflect and really add value to the session. One theme that definitely recurred through everyone's comments about, what needs to change, what needs to be done, and so forth, was that people tend to operate in silos. People, departments, divisions all tend to work in silos. Now, this is something that we often hear about government, whether this one or others. So it's not unique to St. Martin. You also sometimes hear it in private sector, but because everyone in private sector is actively trying to make money, I've encountered it less. So this silo way of operating. On this point, though, my remarks to my ministry were basically this, and I think I wanted to repeat it here because it's something that we all have to start thinking about and shifting how we move. Silos are not built by governments or companies. Actually, they're built by people. Silos are a reflection of people's attitudes. If you decide you want to work in a silo, then guess what? You're going to work in a silo. This is not something that any one person can actually break. Usually it's one person that starts it, and then the entire division or department or unit gets infected, and then it just kind of runs from there. It has to come from within. Now, as minister, myself or anyone else that's on this seat can encourage that breakdown of silo operations. We can enable that there's more collaboration and cooperation. We can demand it, and we can push for it. But ultimately, it takes the people within it to want to make that shift. And sometimes you'll find, even if one person doesn't want to make that change, it falls to others to get that person in line. And I'm looking forward to this cultural shift, within my own ministry, because it needs to happen, not just here, but actually across the board. And I think that's something that we always talk about, but we act as if the processes and procedures and the systems is what makes us work in silos, but actually it's really an attitude problem. If I give a personal experience, when I was at UTS, my division of customer service rarely spoke, actually did not speak at all to operations, who are responsible, of course, for the sites that you see that have the panels on them for the internet solution. And then when the new manager for operations had come in, I said, okay, how about we have a bi-weekly meeting where we talk about what you're doing and we talk about what I'm doing, my expected targets, so we can align so that I'm not installing people on sites and panels that don't have space and then we have angry customers. That is a way of breaking a silo. And what did it take? A person. So, just as a note, that whenever you talk about that, it's not about changing necessarily a system or a process. It's really about the people that work in it. And any process or any system is only as strong as its weakest link, which is, again, the people operating in it. To sports. Um, the multi-purpose court at Robert Sports, update on that from YISC. I'm pretty sure it's probably already done. Knowing YISC, knowing NSI, but I will. They have been, of course, posting about the updates on their Facebook page, so you'll definitely see that happening. And today, I should be getting an update on the HVAC project at the sports auditorium because it is my goal to have that done and sorted before at least Carnival. Because once that starts, yeah. In terms of culture, I want to give a big shout out to our neighbors over in Colombia, in the Collectivité, for the launch of the Immersive Heritage and Culture Tour at Spring Garden. I could not make it to the opening. I'm definitely going to plan a visit in the future, especially since Miss Clara Reyes has promised that they will be obtaining a goat, for the tour. They branded it as being open for those guests seeking something authentic beyond the beach. And I think that's really cool. And that's a great example of bringing to Samata what other islands already do very well, which is blending their culture and their heritage as part of their economic success and highlighting the fact that, this is how we have lived in the past and this is how some still live today. So congrats again to them for that inaugural session, and hope to see you in the future with the GOAT. In terms of youth, so Youth Cabinet had its inaugural meeting on February 12th. We had 6 student representatives present. A few were out due to travel or illness. So looking forward to welcoming them all at the next meeting. It was a good meeting. We had a great icebreaker that my chief of staff and one of my policy advisors had organized. And then following that, we had a presentation given to them by Erin in my cabinet on the structure of the ministry. So now they have an understanding of how it works. You have the minister, the cabinet, then you have the SG and the staff bureau, the different departments. We have 4 policy departments in MECIS, and then, of course, the executionary divisions. So they got an introduction to that structure. And then the division and department heads, as well as the SG, gave introductory remarks, so like a 2-minute pitch on what they do, their roles, so department culture, department sports, department education, department youth, and then the divisions that were able to be present, as well as their priorities for 2026 from a policy perspective. Now, the youth cabinets, the intention of it is that they are engaged in policy development and planning, and just to see how the ministry works in general and how government itself works. And I was curious because at the end of it, we asked them, what are your expectations? They're well aware that they're going to be the ones setting the agenda moving forward following this inaugural meeting. And it was interesting to hear that, they want to talk about things that we might not think they want to talk about. One comment that was made by one of the students is that we can uh, so I'm looking forward to that. Sorry, I just saw something pop up. And so they mentioned want to talk about the fact of the casinos in town, also our natural environment. We tend to allow developers to kind of tear down whatever with little or no regard for land for agriculture, land for culture, land for heritage. We talked a bit as well about the Belvedere South remainder that was just purchased and is allocated to Mekis for culture and heritage preservation and development. And yeah, I'm interested to see what the next agenda is going to be. But suffice it to say, we had a good conversation. We gave them a tour of my office afterwards because we had met, of course, in the Council of Ministers room. And then once we have that, it's up to them as well to communicate. So we said you guys are going to be appointing someone that's going to be your comms person, someone that's going to be taking minutes so that we can keep track of what is being discussed, what is being shared, and again, what their goals are as a youth cabinet. And what they would like to see, happen on St. Martin. So really enjoyed that conversation, that early conversation with them. And that kind of wraps up Mekis Matters for today. Apologies for the early technical challenges. What can we do, right? And then we should be back next week. Of course, getting into Regatta Weekend. Very excited because this year, once again, I'm going to be. I've been invited to join the broadcast boat. Shout out to Soccerin, Dr. Sock from Island 92 Radio. So that'll be the 7th of March. Looking forward to that because me and a boat go together real well. Me and the water, actually. So I'm definitely excited about being able to do that. Maybe I'll go live, probably just from my TikTok, for a bit while on the boat. I wonder if, yeah, we'll probably have data. You want to know why? Because, yeah, those who know why I'm saying. I'll definitely on the water. But thank you for joining. Again, apologies for the technical mishaps, and I will see you guys next week. Wishing everybody a pleasant Tuesday. The weather is great, and of course, a pleasant rest of the week.